I wanted to see what do we think President Trump and President Xi will talk about when they're talking about Iran. We know that northern China is mostly safe from not needing Iranian oil. It's southern China that mainly needs it because China is a very big oil producer.
Wait, you mean
So,
consume? Wait, you mean consumer, right?
yes. But I also mean producer. Northern China produces a lot of oil and they also get some from Russia, but southern China is very vulnerable to getting Iranian oil
So
as well.
China
They need
is a net oil consumer, a very big oil on a net basis. They're an oil consumer, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Go on.
so I'm wondering, what do we think the main talks are they going to be? Are they going to talk about postponing the attacks, or are they going to say, "Oh, we don't care if you guys attack during the while we're here"? I don't know what do you think, Armin?
Okay, so that's a very good question. I'm glad that you brought it up because so many people are trying to guess what the talks are going to be about. And I'm glad that you brought it up because I want to see what other people here have to say as well. So the options, the main things that people have on are talking about that they're guessing. Obviously, the number one is Iran, even though President Trump said, and I think he was joking, that they might not even talk about Iran because he has so much control over the situation right now in Iran that it will be like not even worth talking about. So that's what he was saying. I don't know if he's being serious there or was joking. But then obviously Taiwan is going to be a big topic. Again, I don't know. Then we have AI, right? AI is a big topic. We know Elon is going. So many AI people, so many tech people are going with President Trump. Elon is going with President Trump to China. Okay, so that's a big deal. And then energy, obviously, is going to be a big deal, big talk, part of the talk. Russia is probably going to be a big part of the talk. But obviously, the number one thing that people are thinking about is Iran. So let me actually look at the list that we have here. The most urgent topic in the ongoing talks with China is basically the Iran conflict. So Trump delayed his trip specifically to manage the crisis, the conflict right now. He's now looking to Xi to act as a mediator. Really, some people. So there's some reports that suggest that maybe instead of Pakistan as a mediator, they're looking at China as a mediator, which would not be a fair mediator because China was so much more biased in favor of the Islamic Republic. So that would not be a good mediator. So people, again, this is not my analysis, but I'm telling you what other people are saying. So people are saying the goal is Trump wants China to use its influence to help secure an agreement that reopens the Strait of Hormuz, which is vital for global energy flows. And while China wants regional stability, they are wary of being seen as simply doing Washington's bidding, especially since the US recently sanctioned several Chinese firms for their ties to Iran. So that's number one. Then we have trade. They're going to be talking about the trade. The trade war started in 2025. Both Trump and Xi seeking a more stable economic relationship. Maybe they're going to be talking tariffs. So Trump is expected to announce a board of trade and a board of investment. These would be joint groups of senior officials tasked with defining which goods are non sensitive for trade and overseeing multi billion-dollar purchase agreements. And then we have Trump is pressing for massive Chinese purchases of American soybeans, LNG, that's liquefied natural gas, and Boeing aircraft to reduce the trade deficit. And then obviously we're going to be talking Taiwan. So for President Xi, Taiwan is the top priority. So from our perspective, Iran is top priority. From President Xi's perspective, Taiwan is top priority. I don't know what I think for President Trump's priority, maybe reducing the deficit might be one of his top priorities. So what would be the ask? There are reports that suggest that Xi will push Trump to stop U.S. arms sales Taiwan. Remember that we just got a lot of weapon sales just recently. by United States to Taiwan. We just recently had that, so maybe Xi would want Trump to stop that. So Chinese officials are reportedly framing a resolution on Taiwan as an opportunity for Trump to secure a lasting legacy of peace in Asia. In Asia, the US has maintained its one China policy, but continues to support Taiwan's defense, making this the most sensitive part of the talks. And then we have the tech war and AI war. So the competition for technological supremacy remains fierce, particularly regarding semiconductors and artificial intelligence. Xi wants an end to US restrictions on high end chips manufacturing equipment, especially from NVIDIA, right? So Xi would probably want those restrictions to be lifted. Within the last day, officials confirmed they are discussing a new AI safety framework to prevent AI from being used in military command and control systems in ways that could lead to accidental escalation. And also, we have rare earth and fentanyl. So these are supply chains that Trump is seeking guarantees for the flow of rare earth elements from China, which are essential for U.S. high-tech manufacturing and defense, and also the fentanyl. So that's a public health issue. A key deliverable for the U.S. is a renewed commitment from Beijing to crack down on the export on fentanyl. So those are what I have. Does that answer your question, Noah?
Yeah, that mostly does. On Taiwan, though, there is a very quick point I need to make out. There's a US law that mandates the US arm Taiwan. So even if President Xi wants the US to stop, they won't be able to do that. But yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's a very
Sorry,
good
BT.
point. No, that's a very good point. Actually, that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So there's not that level of. So maybe what they're doing is that they're talking about the level. Obviously, they can't stop United States from completely ending sales to of weapons to Taiwan. So maybe they're negotiating on the level, right?
Oh,
To
yeah,
reduce.
correct. Thank you, Armin.
No, thank you. I'm glad that you brought that up. This is a very important question that more people need to be talking about right now. And I'm
No
very eager
problem.
to see what other people here have to say about that because I think we have some twos here as well.
Okay, first to respond, we have Sketch.
Yes, I want to also bring up that there are, I believe it's 6 or 7 military partnerships in South Asia with Philippines, with Malaysia, with Vietnam, with Australia, with Japan. So that might be part of the discussion. It's not just Taiwan, it's all those other military partnerships. Some of those partnerships are new, and they have air and sea partnerships using of bases and bays. So there's a lot of partnerships that are like saying you keep helping China, you helping Iran make this or Hormuz mess. You're forgetting that we are in Malacca, we are in all these places where you would have trouble sustaining your production because the production that China does have is below sustainment. That's why they're a net importer. I think they import way more than they produce. And I would also point out that when China was mentioned recently, it was also mentioned in light of the uranium. So Iran might be saying, instead of you getting the uranium, why don't you let China come get the uranium? Which they would probably lie and say they took it and not take it, and show some other thing or whatever. Like I wouldn't trust them too, but Iran might putting that into the talks, and that might be. I found it odd that they were so specifically only China and us. Why is he bringing that up? Did Iran mention it? Is he just putting that into the mix because he has to go to China anyway, so he wants to mention them in a. So he's a bit of a schmoozer. A schmoozer is someone who likes to compliment you a lot to get you to agree to some stuff, but I think that's also important to point out. And I think economically, as far as chips, companies like Supermicro and even NVIDIA have been under close watch by the FBI for having subcontractors uh, give a lot of their supply to China. They're under sanctions, under arrest. There are other companies that are under arrest for shipping. Lloyd's, which I think Lloyd's is related to China. They have a lot of loss in the Straits. So I think China is a lot more economic trouble than they let on, than the people that want to have like a very measured take. I think China is in far deeper trouble than we know, and she will basically make any concessions. I believe they had also talked about some Boeings, buying some Boeings. I don't think we should sell them any Boeings. They just use them to go arm Iran. So I don't believe that deal would be wise. And I would take all that and put all that together when we talk about China and the military, and when we talk about China and economics and technology. Also, one more thing: any deal we make on AI, it would them restricting us and giving themselves an out. If they say, "Oh, we have to make a deal on AI in case AI accidentally hits something," it'd be like, "Oh, that's a nice AI we got here. What if my AI hits you? Don't you want to make a deal?" Because if we don't make a deal, they'll hit something and blame the AI. And if we do make a deal, we would be inhibiting ourselves. I wouldn't make a deal with them on anything like that because they would just use it to their advantage. And that's all I got to say about that.
Two things I want to say about everything that you brought up. First of all, President Trump being a schmoozer, it was actually interesting because if you look at the Islamic Republic State TV in Iran, one thing I noticed, I don't know if it was on their TV or one of their media outlets on YouTube, but these were the Islamic Republic analysts. I was interesting. I was watching that, and they said something that ended up being pretty accurate. I was actually very interested to see how, I think it was on state TV. Yes, it was on state TV that they actually got this point very accurately. So these were analysts of the Islamic Republic on Iranian state TV, and they were saying that you should fear Trump the most when he compliments you. So I was like, okay, that was pretty good awareness by some regime analysts. Okay, yeah. So that, and also one thing regarding AI, I don't know if I agree with again, I know a lot of you might disagree with me on this, but I don't know if I agree with the ban on NVIDIA chips to the sale of those to China, because I think this is actually hurts American companies more than it hurts China. I think that NVIDIA being able to sell to China is good for America and bad for China, because I know Jeffrey keeps shaking his head like that, but I know, yeah, you guys are, I understand that you guys want maximum pressure against China, but I think this is maximum pressure against NVIDIA. NVIDIA is an American company, and reliance on NVIDIA, if it makes NVIDIA stronger. If you are afraid that China will reverse engineer whatever NVIDIA makes, it's not that hard to get enough of NVIDIA products to be able to try to reverse engineer that. The ban will not stop that. What the ban does, it encourages more, it puts more economic incentives for Chinese companies. It will put more capital in China to move towards figuring these things out themselves. But if NVIDIA is free to sell to China, it will make Chinese companies dependent on an American company, and it will make it more difficult for Chinese companies to be able to get as strong as NVIDIA, and it will make the American company dominate and be able to compete even better against these Chinese company. So if you want to be pro-America and anti-Chinese, then don't tie the hands of American companies. Let them loose, let them grow. China is a big market. NVIDIA is an American company, and letting NVIDIA grow as much as it possibly can is good for America. That's an America first policy. All right.
Next to respond, we have Jose.
Okay, I want to take on the part where, if you can hear me. Okay, I want to respond to when Armin was talking about why would they want Z to be the mediator. First of all, could be a couple things. I've been following what's been going on in China, and Z has been, he's killed 13 generals since January, 3 of which were red princelings. And if you understood what I said before, red princelings are the cream of the cream, the very top of Chinese society. They are the children or grandchildren. Z is a grandchild of one of Mao's compatriots that fought alongside Mao. They got power. They run businesses. They're the ones turning into billionaires. blah, blah, blah. Okay. He's lost face with them. And to the Chinese, you need to do something to regain face. It's all about honor. And if you think the Japanese and the Koreans are stuck up with that kind of stuff, the Chinese practically invented that way of thought. So he just might be forced by his own remaining generals to do this. And another thing about Taiwan, of the 13 generals, every single one of them is against invading Taiwan because they think the Taiwanese and Americans will kick their ass. And that's why he's been removing them, for that one little piece of information that they threw back at him. That's all I got.
Awesome.
Next to respond, Jeffrey.
I love you, Armin. You know it's coming.
Look, I know that you're married to a more laissez-faire free market approach. The problem is we tried that with China and they violated every agreement and it didn't work the way you're presenting it might. So the idea that, so it's true that the Chinese Communist, the argument is what? The fact that the Chinese Communist Party may eventually reverse engineer advanced chips because they get a couple of them via espionage. So we should just sit there and just sell them as many chips as possible, right? So the problem with that is saying they can reverse engineer it anyway is like saying we should hand them more aircraft engines because they'll eventually copy one. The problem is when you do that, you're giving them more samples, more design clues, more opportunities, and a feedstock to tear down and back engineer. So like one of the things that was argued in the beginning part of the post-Soviet era vis-a-vis China, and they used the very argument you used, or very similar anyway, was that if companies can sell to China, then they would use the profit and proceeds and reinvest them here in the United States, and that would increase research intensity that would offset the increase in technical diffusion from the United States to the periphery. The problem with that is it never panned out that way, like in any way, shape, or form. If you had an honest broker on the other end, sure. China's not an honest broker, bro. You really are not. And as far as like deals on AI, I'm very much with Sketch. The Chi-Coms are very much trying to go, let's not use military in the like AI in the military version of the decision support role. Yeah, because we have the first mover advantage right now. They want to constrain us till they catch up. Fuck that. I'm not trying to have that. That would be a big mistake.
I
say
like
that with
how,
all love.
yeah, but I like how these arguments come as if I'm trying to be favorable. Like the assumption sometimes the people I'm making in the chat, for example, is as if I'm trying to be favorable to China. I want to crush the CCP. I want to annihilate the CCP. We're just talking about the best way to go about doing that, right? And Jerry Samantha, you putting crying emoji over crushing the CCP after knowing what the CCP did to the Iranian people and supporting the Islamic Republic I don't understand that. You know what the CCP stands for. So you're putting crying emojis over us wanting to destroy the CCP doesn't make any sense, right? So I am as against the CCP as you could imagine, right? And telling me that China is not an honest broker, does anybody assume that I think that China is an honest broker? I'm just trying to find the best way to defeat them, right? And they claim that it didn't pan out. The United States has come on top in the technology and the markets. So yeah, the Chinese have managed to find some ways using their scheming, like how's that work? That didn't pan out. How has that worked for China? Instead of trying to win honestly in the global markets, coming up with their schemes and their tricks and their cons, has it made them the leading in AI? Has that made them leading in the global economy? They're pathetically weak. They're a paper tiger. Look at their military. Look at everything that they do is just branding and marketing. They're so far behind. So I think the American model, when it comes to the free markets and basically supporting the private sector, even though it's not as much as a level as I want it to be, but that has made the United States stronger. And the model that has made the United States stronger than the CCP. We should just continue to do just more of that. When it comes to the NVIDIA, let me just tell you, okay? Because I'm prepared for this. I actually have written all of, I have this text all of it here ready, right? So China is the world's largest market for AI chips. There's the billions of dollars that NVIDIA earns, they stay in the US. They come to the US. That's basically moving money from China to the US, directly funding the research and development of R&D and putting United States ahead. They're giving us money to fund the R&D on a much higher level, right? That's a market that if you take away from the NVIDIA, you're taking away a significant R&D money away from them, right? So there's that. And then there's the software dominance. So you guys, I think, know about CUDA, the CUDA trap. By selling hardware, the US ensures that Chinese developers continue building AI on CUDA. The CUDA is the framework that NVIDIA has, and you will force this AI. If you know how it works, it has a network effect. The more people use the framework of NVIDIA, the more they're going to get trapped in it. It's really hard to compete with NVIDIA's model because of that framework that they have. So if you have more NVIDIA chips in China, more developers in China will get stuck with this CUDA trap, and they will be stuck within a US framework that the Chinese providers will not be able to compete with that. That's a very important. If people understand how this works, they will understand how big of an advantage this will be to the Americans, right? And then selling hardware allows the US to track exactly what tech level China is using, basically because it will be within the framework of United States. So the black box domestic Chinese development is much harder for US intelligence to monitor than hardware that must comply with US export reporting and also the frameworks that is under NVIDIA. And then we also will have economic leverage. Creating a dependency is a powerful tool. If China's entire AI economy runs on American chips, the US maintains the off switch. If China becomes a self-sufficient, if China becomes self-sufficient, the US loses that leverage forever. And then we have the reasons why this is bad for China if we actually do this. So if Chinese tech giants like Alibaba can buy high quality NVIDIA chips, they have less incentives to fund and use domestic alternatives like Huawei and basically chips. There was from any other local Chinese company. This slows down China's goal of semiconductor self-reliance. And we also, to comply with US laws, NVIDIA sells basically nerf slow down versions of their chips to China. But if you want to do, that's one way to have control. I don't agree with this, but some people say at least allow them to continue doing that. By buying these Chinese effectively agree to run its AI on inferior hardware. So this is one way people think that inferior NVIDIA chips is still better than anything that China could make locally. And this will keep them behind US, but at the same time, because it's better than whatever the Chinese could create, it will have the benefit of dependency on United States while they're a step behind Americans. And then we have capital drain. Every $1 billion spent on NVIDIA is $1 billion that is not going into China's own state-backed chip factories or fabs. It forces China to export its wealth to an American company rather than building its own internal economy. And then switching an entire nation's AI infrastructure from one chip architecture to another is incredibly hard and expensive. The longer China stays on NVIDIA, the more technical debt they accrue. So the longer this goes on, the harder it's going to be for China to divorce from NVIDIA, and it will make them more dependent on United States. This will give United States so much leverage over them. Anyways, so these are the list of the reasons that I just gave you. All right, what are we doing now?
Okay, the last to respond to this was Sketch. Make it fast, please. And we are moving on because we are almost an hour in, and that was the first topic.
Oh my God.
All right, on these chips, China could make 7 nanometer chip. I don't care how much they try to retro engineer. They're not making a 3 nanometer chip. That's the main reason they want Iran. They want those fabrications because they have no idea how to make it, and they're 10 to 20 years away from making them. Now, I will show you personally my face and my ID. I dealt with a lot of circuit boards and a lot of chips and tanks. They can't make it. Giving it to them isn't gonna make it easier. Isn't gonna help because they can make it anyway, any more than giving uranium to Iran is going to be good because they're going to wind up making it anyway. Any type of logic you apply from the free market to because these are weapons, you classify them perhaps as this is the market. This is not the market. These are weapons. When we're talking about the 1-ton server racks that they are trying to steal through deceptive shell game corporations into China, we're not talking about a consumer chip. This isn't GPUs that they're funneling through Alibaba. We're talking about two very different things. This is not a GPU that you're getting from Alibaba. This is a 1-ton rack that they had to make 5 shell corporations to get to China. It's not the same thing. This is military hardware.
All right, you said
the
that.
people that, okay,
Yeah.
the people that make the planes, the people that make the viruses and the solutions against viruses, they use this level of corporate military. And we know the corporations are the ones that make our weapons, right? Do we want to give those tools to China? That's a ridiculous claim. This is not the regular market. This is the military market, and we don't want to
You
give these
said that.
weapons to China.
Okay, Sketch, you could, when you say that 6 times, that this
You
is
did
not
too.
good.
You repeated your point. We can rewind. You repeated your point 6 times. So what?
Okay, I'll try to do better. I'll try not to repeat. All right. So here's the thing, but what you're saying does not negate my point, because I also mentioned that whatever you think, here's the thing, here's how you could have the best of both worlds. Whatever you think they will never be able to make, those are the ones that you ban. Okay, fine. I'll meet you halfway. Anything else that is NVIDIA, that is something that they could eventually make themselves, you make sure NVIDIA can sell those to destroy their ability to make that internally. How about that? I'll meet you halfway. So anything that you are reasonably, okay, then you're being unreasonable. Anything that you
No,
are,
I'm agreeing with you, and we are giving
okay.
them better than that. We're giving them better than that because what we're giving them in our consumer chips is still better than what they can manufacture. Our 5 nanometer.
But that's a good in between then, right? That's a good in between. Anything that
I'll go beyond that. I'll meet you harder. I agree.
Okay, great. So guys, I know I'm repeating myself, but this is what we agreed on. Okay, anything that we could be completely reassured, like if people with expertise in this are like, China will never be able to build this. Okay, anything that they will never be able to build, we will not sell to them. Anything that they could eventually build, we will sell that to them so that they would not have enough money to get to the point where they can build it, because it's hard to compete with the US market. Okay? Good. We solved it. Guys, we solved it. All right?
Hopefully
right,
Trump sees this.
Yes.
Okay, so roughly along these lines, Daniel Dome, are you ready to come up and ask your question? Still US, China.
So this will just be in the continuation of the same topic, so I'm not going to change the ban.
All right, so as I see it, what Trump and Xi will talk about, we might never know, but I guess after the meeting is ended, they will, like Trump will eventually go, oh, we had a great meeting, we had a great talk, and on the surface, nothing will be changed. And only some speculations of all the media will go bonkers, like, oh, Trump sold Taiwan to Xi, and all these speculations. And like, I wanted to ask what in the political perspective will be different after this meeting with Trump with Xi.
So I don't think it will just all be speculations. There's too many people there that could see what's happening for all of this information to be complete. I'm sure some information will be kept secret, but Trump is not just going alone. Okay, that he's bringing a whole army with him of industry leaders for negotiations and talks and trade and investments, and he's bringing Scotty B with him, for crying out loud, right? Elon is going with him. So I think there's a lot that's going to change based on these meetings. These are important people, and all President Trump is not going to go waste his time in China for no change. And all of these billionaires and industry leaders are not going to go to China for no change. I think some major things are going to come out of this, and I don't think that I'm sure you're right that some of it is just going to be baseless speculation, but I don't think all of it is going to be baseless speculation. Given that the number of people involved, they could see what's happening, they could see the deals that are being made, they could see that the agreements that are being signed, and a lot of it will be public. A lot of it that is not meant to be public will get leaked anyway because of the number of people involved, and some things will be. So we're going to have three categories: things that will be made public, things that were not meant to be public but will be leaked anyways, and things that will remain hidden and we will never know about. But I think we're going to have all three of them.
And I think, sorry,
Go ahead, we can
oh,
hear you.
so yeah, sorry. So I think Trump making a show off, and he like basically brought the best of what he has, came with them to China, like showed Xi, look at us, you will never be like us. Look, we have the brightest minds, and our brightest minds came to look at you, poor guys, with all your propaganda, and hold on, we will sell you our inventions, you will try to copycat it, and you will do the copy for the poor, and after all, we're still on the top. I think this is a kind of a message that Trump creates with all this big convoy to China.
You know what? I like your version. Okay. I'm not saying this is what's happening, but I want this to be I want this to be what's happening. It's not, but I want it. So your version is that they're like, oh my God, this will be beautiful. They're just going there. I'm actually going to change it and leave it even a little bit better. I'm going to make it more extreme because this is just so fun. So they're just going to go there and they're going to be changing nothing. They're like, we're not here asking for anything and giving you anything. We're just here to show you, look at what we have, and fuck you. You'll never be as good as us. Look at us. Look at our industry leaders, and just don't eat our dust and buy. That's all we came. We just came here to tell you how pathetically behind you are compared to the rest of us, and that's all. No signs, no signing of any agreements, no negotiations, nothing. Just eat shit and goodbye. Right. Okay. Yeah, why not? Let's go with that. All right.
We need to all take mental note of this moment right here. And if Daniel Dome is right, and this is exactly what happened, we owe him some praise, something special. This sounds, now that you say it, something sounds very legitimate about this. Okay, we're going to see. First to respond, we have Samantha.
Samantha's mic is closed. Oh, she wants to see. Oh, okay? I read it. Let me read it. Okay, so Samantha put this in the chat. I'll read it. She says, "Please read what the CCP did to Iran made me prefer America to the CCP." Wow, that's progress. But I am way too scared. An American monopoly of power. Oh, you're very scared of an American monopoly of power. Okay, to want to see the CCP destroyed. Okay, so you know what? I actually understand that. What I want is for China to be liberated and for the Chinese people to become sovereign and the Chinese people to be free and for China to become a free country where the Chinese people could thrive and grow. And I would love that as a I would love that country to be a competitor to the United States. I don't see that happening for the foreseeable future, but I do want competition to the United States. Competition makes the United States better, but I do want the Chinese people to be free. I want the private market in China to flourish, and I want the people to be able to be at some point to be able to choose their own destiny. So I know, Samantha, I know you're giving me the crying emoji, but when I say the private market capitalism, I see people making decisions making their own economic decisions rather than the government making it for them. That's what I mean. You could basically see it that way instead.
Please
I
don't
will-
be mad.
I'm not mad. I'm not mad. I'm just actually being more. I'm just speaking in a language that you would appreciate more. Okay. So when I say private market, you might be sensitive to that vocabulary. So I'm just reframing it. I'm just saying, instead of saying private markets, I will say more people making economic decisions for their businesses themselves, rather than having a central authority making that decision for it. So I'm just rewording it in a way that you could appreciate, instead of using those words that you don't like, right? So I'm actually not, I'm not being mad with you. I'm just trying to basically explain it in a way that you might like more. And yeah, but also I don't think the United States will always have competition, right? Just because the United States is the world's greatest economy and has the greatest military and has the most powerful culture, being the most powerful doesn't make you the monopoly. Doesn't make you a monopoly, because it's the United States and the rest of the world. The United States is competing even with countries that are so much less powerful than it, right? United States is and this is good for United States. We want competition. United States is competing with Vietnam. United States is competing with Indonesia. United States is competing with Uganda. United States is competing with Ukraine. By United States, I don't mean the entirety of United States. Different companies and people, they're competing with the whole world. Every single product or service that comes out from American companies into the global market is competing with everything else that is being offered by everybody else in the world. So the competition will be there. There will be massive competition that United States has to deal with, even with United States being the global superpower. So don't worry about lack of competition. The United States will always have competition, even if it's the world superpower.
Without CCP, the US has too much power.
Without the CCP, okay, but without the CCP, the US has too much power. But okay, but CCP's power is evil, right? We don't, if you want power, actually, the United States actually wants to have other powers sharing the responsibility of global stability. The United States doesn't want to be in the situation where it's only it being responsible. Like the American tax, when we say United States, we're talking about the American taxpayers. We're talking about the American voters. It's unfair to American taxpayers to be responsible for global security. But there's no other way, because no country on earth comes even remotely close to United States when it comes to having an army to provide stability. But the problem is that China is not contributing to world stability. So China is a threat to global stability. If you had United States providing to its military to keep the world more stable and secure, and China was doing that as well as a competition to United States, then I would agree with you. It would be like, oh, but it's good to have them both. But that's not what the situation is. United States military is making the world more stable, and China's power, the CCP's power and influence and culture and its soft power and its military power and its economy is doing the opposite. So that's not competition. That's a force of evil against everything that we want. Your scenario, what you're describing would have been the right position to have if we had two militaries on earth both trying to make the world more peaceful, and they were competing against each other to be able to do that better than the other one. But China is not doing that. China is moving in the opposite direction. All right.
Okay. Responses to this start with Jose.
Okay, I have a couple of points I want to point out to you guys. I've been posting into the chat group things that have been happening in China. When I mentioned those 13 generals, 3 of them were killed because one was in charge with the missile system that failed in Iran. The other was in charge of the radar system that failed in Iran. Okay. And the third was in charge of their version the Russian, the Chinese version of a tank that they called the M1, the Abrams killer, which is their main battle tank, which they sold almost 30 of them, maybe more, to an African country. And when they took them out in the field to test them, none of the guns fired. And once they went looking in, half the shit was fried. Okay? That's just military. Russia's, after COVID, because the Chinese prices came down, bought Chinese trailer trucks, Chinese EV, Chinese gas vehicles. Okay? Guess what happened to all those vehicles when it snowed? They rusted in less than a year and a half or 2 years. If you think Canada made a great deal with China by getting all those EVs, it snows just as bad in Canada as it does for most of Russia. They're going to find out that they just wasted money buying those cars if they do bring them in, if Carney does bring them in. That's the problem with Chinese manufacturing. The Chinese manufacturers cheapen, reduce, save money, charge more money, make bigger profit. They don't have the regulations in order to put a car on the road in the United States, South America, anywhere in Europe, hell, Africa. If you think the Iranian cars are a piece of shit, like I've heard discussed on this channel, imagine driving down the road and your engine falls apart in 5 pieces because it's been out in the cold and it rusted through completely. And I've seen Russians in Russian, very bad translations. I can tell that by the fact that they're cursing up a storm, and these translators don't like that. Opening the hood and seeing their engine cracked in half, going under, and the transmission disappeared somewhere. Okay, that's the quality. That's one of the reasons why they need the chips. Okay, but as long as they have that mentality, I'm not too worried about them doing anything. They might make their missiles or the radar a little better. Okay, they have other issues that weren't chips with the tanks, and the car, that's production. Oh, by the way, they copied Elon Musk's Teslas, and Teslas, I haven't heard a single Tesla that rusted in the United States or Canada or Europe. The ones that are in Europe either, in the cold weather. So
Okay.
it's not as one-sided. Sketch, I understand you, but it's not as one-sided as you might think, because their mentality is what will keep them from actually catching up. And we actually need the stuff we have that we need from them in order for our microchip industry to continue is the rare earths they have a shitload of, and we have very little of. That's why we're going after Greenland. And oh, by the way, folks, the Greenlanders are talking, it's the Norwegians that are blocking. The Greenlanders seem to be okay with it. That's all.
Oh, I would like to see if the Greenlanders are okay with that, because every time I talk about this, people think I'm talking about an invasion against the will of the Greenlander people. I'm always talking about just convincing them that this is good for them. And people telling me that they don't want this. And I would love to see reports that they actually are okay with this, because that would be a huge advantage to our side if we could get that.
Okay.
Yeah. But
when I find the article, I'll post it.
Thank you. Tag me in that as well, please. Thank you.